Hello, Dearbhla.
Hi.
I'm so happy to have this time together with you. You know, we haven't really had a chance to get to know each other. You know, you've taught all over, and now that we're here at the Center for Yoga, I'm really looking forward, to kind of studying with you and to learning about your background. You have kind of a unique background compared to many of the other teachers that I've worked with. So by way of introduction, I think many of us are interested in how we come to yoga, and you have kind of a unique story.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm delighted to be here with you, and I feel very humbled by you saying you're looking forward to studying with me, because you being who you are, that's such an honor, and makes me feel very humble, so thank you. And yeah, I would say that there's two prongs to my story of how I came to yoga and how it came to be the scaffolding of my life. On the one hand, for all of my life, I've always been interested in the question, who am I? What is it to be the same person over time? What makes me the same person over time? How do I even cohere as a personal identity? It's no coincidence that I found my way into a PhD program in philosophy, given that for me, that's just like kind of coffee table conversation. But the other prong is that when I was 19 years old, I was in a very serious car accident in Ireland. And I spent 5 days in and out of a coma and had very significant fractures, injuries, and fractured skull and punctured lung. I was very, very severely injured. And I came out of that with PTSD. Let's say PTSD developed from that. So I was never the most equanimous person to start with. So I found that my equanimity was lessened, diluted, whatever equanimity I had, and I had massive anxiety. And I came to understand that anxiety is visceral, that when your body doesn't feel safe in the world, that will ripple out into your whole experience of the world and your whole affect. So I'd known about yoga because my mom used to practice yoga out of a book in the 70s with other women in the neighborhood. So I always knew about it. And when I was studying in Amsterdam as an exchange student, I took some classes to help me manage my anxiety because it was extreme. And then I was on hiatus for some years. I was back in Dublin. I always kept meaning to get back to it, but never did, in my early 20s. And then I moved to Chicago to get a PhD in philosophy, which is where it all really married together, because I don't know if you've ever been in a PhD program, but they're extremely stressful and the pressure is very intense. And I'd always meant to get back to yoga, so that was the perfect moment. I knew that the time had arrived. And I would say from then on, it all married together, because when I really, really started to practice very consistently and sincerely, wholeheartedly, gave it everything, my life started to change, as I think probably you've heard from probably every teacher you've talked to and from your own background. And I was able to, my body was reclaimed to me as sacred ground. I started to feel safe in my body again. And that created its own ripple.
It's such an amazing dichotomy from what I hear you saying, the analytic mind of philosophy program,
right?
Who am I? All those questions of identity that we often have in like our early 20s or as young adults, and how much we identify as women with our body in that time. And then, in your words, I had to reclaim my body and when it feels safe. What kind of yoga at that time helped you in this kind of shattered and vulnerable body to feel safe?
It was actually Anna Forrest's method. I stumbled into a Forrest yoga class, just not knowing what it was. It was on the schedule. I stumbled in. And
in Chicago? In
Chicago, yeah. And then I took my first 2 trainings with her, and I used to actually assist her at Yoga Journal conference and different trainings and that. And it was her, I think her particular medicine is the understanding that the body is a tape recorder that records everything that happens. And I found that the yoga mat was a place where I didn't have to get into the memories of what happened, but somatically I could, if you will, breathe through them. Actually, I could quite literally breathe through them, and in a pigeon pose, maybe cry my way through the pose, but know that something had been left on the mat, and in the leaving of whatever was left on the mat, something else integrated in me more deeply.
So the word somatic that you used, you know, the soma, the body, and the feeling, the kind of sense memory, it's so fabulous what you say, that it doesn't matter if we kind of recognize what it is that we leave on the mat. You know, sometimes things just come out, that muscle memory even.
Right.
So I didn't know that Anna Forrest was your first teacher. You know, Anna and I, in the 80s, would practice in this room together at 4 o'clock in the morning.
I've done that with Anna. I've got up at 2:30 a.m. to assist her.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So we kind of have that in
beautiful.
common.
Yeah.
So now in your practice, it seems that you brought everything together. You've mentioned that the psychoneuroimmunology, you know, how now as we move forward, fast forward from when we both started 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you know, there's more of an understanding of the body-mind connection. How do you integrate that into your classes and your teaching or your practice?
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful question. First of all, I hope that I'm doing it, that I'm seeding little malas of it. I found I get very excited about things, I'm passionate about things, so I found I've had to modulate that so that it doesn't come off as a wave of intensity. So I found that it's a dance to integrate those teachings, because people do want to come and do a physical practice. They're not coming for a philosophy talk. I love teaching philosophy workshops, that's separate. But I try and maybe set an intention at the start of class, and maybe a sentence that might, stimulate a visceral understanding, if you will, or even just coach the breath as itself a vehicle for reclaiming, to go back to that word, reclaiming the body as sacred ground. So I try to be subtle I've learned that it's very important to be subtle, and for it to be an invitation so that people feel welcomed into that depth rather than confronted with it.
Well, especially since you've mentioned in your earlier years with the accident that PTSD. So the words you just used, it's an invitation, it's a welcoming. You know,
Right.
You know, those are words that are so important. You know, and I think that collectively, globally, there's a certain amount of PTSD now that these last 2 years, you know, will take a while for us all to feel safe again collectively.
Yes, yeah, great point. Absolutely.
So for us to find a way to kind of welcome and acknowledge that each person, you know, will find their own way back to a sense of safety. So in your words, you said through yoga we gain sovereignty of our inner domain. I love that. You know, and you said self-mastery is the final frontier. I love that too.
It has been for me, let me tell you. Ask my husband.
And what are the steps to self-mastery?
Well, I have found, and I wanted to add that I've since learned that a more apt term that now is to say virtuosity in self, which I love also, and that yoga is the path to being virtuous in being yourself. For me, the steps to, let's say, enhance virtuosity have been, first of all, a welcoming, which we talked about. And if you frame it in terms of teaching, meeting people where they are, of course, it's very difficult to meet yourself where you are, at least that's my experience. And I think the breath, again, is an ally in that, because the breath is the great ally of us as yogins, calming the nervous system as it does and giving the mind something to focus on, and the immediate feeling of safety in your body when you can take a deep breath. So I would say there's been that for me, using all of the philosophical resources, because I'm a geek, I love all that stuff. So kind of getting a lot of that, studying with people, Ayurveda, learning about Ayurveda, Yoga Nidra. Richard Miller is also one of my teachers. I've studied with him. I've taken a training with him in Yoga Nidra. I rest Yoga Nidra, and found that to be incredibly helpful. as a tool of integration.
How do you use that in your yoga practice or your teaching?
I do a lot of led yoga nidras myself as part of my ongoing practice and sadhana. In my teaching, I use it not so much, sometimes a longer guided shavasana, a body sensing shavasana, but often just coaching people at the beginning of class or even at the end to meet yourself where you are, to observe what's happening, to welcome sensation. So again, seeding in subtly as best I can what I've learned from it without saying, okay, we're officially doing a yoga nidra practice. Although I did have the experience of teaching vets with PTSD, Navy SEALs, teaching them yoga nidra, which was an incredible, humbling experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think being in those, I'm sure you've been in many different environments as a teacher as well, somebody of your caliber and how long you've been teaching. I think it causes you to be a more authentic teacher, because populations like that, I don't know if you've ever gone into a prison either, you can't BS them, sorry. If you are not coming from a place of authenticity, they can smell it. Yeah. So you have to drop into what you've learned and what you know, and I think it's good for us to put ourselves in places like that, because the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and you really have to rely on what you've integrated in your own being as opposed to a book or... so that's been helpful for me actually also, to put myself in positions where it really felt I was in a crucible. So
that takes, as you said, humility and courage. And being willing to be vulnerable and to, I think the main time, actually now I'm thinking about it, yes, there have been several times, but the main time that happened to me that I remember was in India, and in the late 90s. And I had been working with HIV quite extensively, and my teacher, Guruji B.K.S. Iyengar, asked me to go to a clinic in Pune and work with a group of HIV positive. So here I was, a Westerner in India, going to, and there were probably 30 people there who did not have access to medication, and I knew that some of them were on their way out, and here I am, a Westerner. What do I have to offer these people at the seat of yoga, in the arms of yoga? Right. And just for us to be quiet and to own together and to feel the gentleness of the breath and the collective process that we had. It really was kind of a line down, the word crucible that you used, to have the willingness, to be with them in those conditions.
Beautiful. Wow.
So teaching in a prison, was that here in this country? Or?
Yeah, it was in Tracy, Northern California. I went with my friend Robert Sturman, you probably know Robert,
yes,
the photographer.
Yes.
And at the invitation of the warden, there was already a yoga program going there. And Robert was invited in to document it, and he wanted to bring me to facilitate a discussion amongst the inmates to teach in the program, and then facilitate a discussion amongst the inmates and also with the warden and write about it, all of which happened. And I think also, I had no training or anything, like I didn't, I just kind of went in there like heart out. But I think my experience of having that such massive trauma also made me able to relate to those guys, because I think prison is a place of trauma. And since I've gone through it and lived through it, nobody welcomes that, but I'm not afraid of it. Yeah. Because I've gone through it and I know that there is light. And let me tell you, the conversation I had with those guys, they were next level in terms of their understanding of the efficacy of yoga for creating inner change, for creating equanimity. It was stunning listening to them. And I'm sorry, were you about to say something?
Well, I can imagine that here, where sense gratification is just 2 seconds away, and it's immediate sense gratification, but there, immediate self gratification is nil. So the opportunity that yoga, and I know Vipassana is available kind of worldwide in prisons, and in rehab programs, and so helpful that that yoga can now be accessible like that. So there's another word that I hear you use often. You use enhanced virtuosity, but there's flourish. Flourishing. I love it. Just before the pandemic, you taught a workshop called here, I think, at the center, Turn Your Drama into Dharma. Yoga and the Art of Flourishing. I love that, and in this time when the center is coming back and we're hoping that people will come back, how can we flourish? What is?
Oh gosh. Well, I think my understanding of flourishing, it's an Aristotelian concept. I don't know if you've ever heard the Greek word for eudaimonia. And Aristotle thought that flourishing is about a life well lived. It's not just happiness, it includes rationality as well, or we might say buddhi, or it includes discernment. So it's self-reflective as well as just going for the ice cream. It doesn't mean you can't have the ice cream, but the other stuff, at least for this kind of second order happiness, if you will, or derivement of enjoyment from life. It's about cultivating these other aspects of ourselves. And of course, things like friendship and harmony and feeling good in our bodies would be part of that also. There's nothing about it that's austere or renunciation. I think we're making a good stab at it here at the center. I mean, I think we're building a beautiful community. There's a beautiful feeling in here and a feeling of dharma, and to go back to the word welcoming, it seems to be the word that's coming up most in our conversation. So that's how I understand it, and also challenge. They say that, I learned from a book I read by an Irish psychologist, that for people to really flourish or thrive, challenge is required, that we don't actually thrive when we don't have challenge. And I think even in an asana class, and you know better than I do, given that you're such a senior teacher, if you don't give students a challenge, at some point, as one of my teachers says, just go and play badminton or take up running. If your practice isn't nudging you to engage with discomfort on some level, and I don't mean physical pain at all, if we're not expanding the threshold, then I would say we're not flourishing. Of course you want a long shavasana and a nice supported Supta Baddha Konasana, but for that edge to be there, because it turns out we really thrive on challenge.
Right. Whether it's the downward dog, or whether it's experiencing the breath, or whether it's being able to let go in Shavasana. What I loved about that word flourish is I know the metta prayer, and I've replaced one of the words in that for myself. And the very condensed version is, may I be safe, may we be safe, may I be healthy, may we be healthy, may I flourish.
Beautiful.
May we flourish.
Yeah.
Rather than happy, it's usually, but may we flourish.
Yeah, so, beautiful.
Yeah, and may that be the prayer for Center
May
for
our
Yoga.
center flourish, yes, and our community.
Thank you for being a part of that. I really look forward to growing together, and
thank you.
Hari Om, coming home.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.